Hey guys, I'm Geek. In this video, I wanted to compare the Nintendo Switch 2 with my handheld gaming devices that I use frequently, right? And of course, this is just my personal opinions about these devices and what do I think one versus the other. So let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, let's go ahead and compare the Nintendo Switch with the only handheld here that it's really not a standalone handheld device, right? This is the PlayStation Portal 2. The reason it looks like this grayish is because this is the 30th anniversary. For those that don't know, normally it comes in white and black, and now I think there is a completely black version now. Now, when this first came out, this was only a remote play device. You know, if you didn't have a PlayStation 5, if you didn't have internet, this was basically a brick. Okay, this goes for around $200, but there's been a lot of updates after its release. Now you can actually connect it to the cloud, and all you need is to be paying for a PlayStation Premium account, and now you have access for cloud gaming. Which is very good because these games that you see right here, I can play these games without having a PlayStation 5 console or a PlayStation 4 console, because these games are being streamed from the cloud to this device, which is pretty damn good. But of course, you know, if you don't have internet, this thing is basically a brick, of course. When it comes to the screen size, this is 7.9. This is 8 inches. They are both LCD screens. They both look very, very good. That's one thing that I was very impressed about the PlayStation Portal since day one. I think even though this is not an OLED screen, this is one of the most beautiful LCD screens I've ever seen on a handheld device. This is freaking awesome. The only thing that I would have to say that this actually beats the Nintendo Switch and every other device here that I'm going to be showing you guys is the comfort, the way that it feels when you have it in your hands. And it's because you're basically getting here the DualSense controller, the actual DualSense controller split in two with a screen in the middle. That's basically what it is. When it comes to the rumble functions, when it comes to the microphone, when it comes to blowing out a device, yes, because it also has like a microphone there, everything functions just like the DualSense controller. So that's the great thing about this device, that comfort-wise, this is way more comfortable than Nintendo Switch and any other device that you're going to see here on this video. Of course, it only goes for $200. Like I said, if you don't have internet, it's basically a brick. What Sony has done here actually makes me a little bit more excited for what they can do later on in the future if they decide to go with a standalone handheld device, which is rumors that they will actually do. And if they apply some of this with actual internal storage and native installation of PlayStation 5 games, this would actually be a very, very hard device to actually beat. Other than that, you know, these two devices are very, very, very drastically different. Which one do I prefer? Obviously, I'm going to prefer the Nintendo Switch 2. Obviously, I'm going to prefer that. But yeah, other than that, very good devices. But of course, cloud versus standalone. Now here we're going to compare the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the Steam Deck OLED. This is the OLED version, which has a 7.4 inches, 800p screen, 90 hertz. So that means you can play games up to 90 frames per second. Over here, the Nintendo Switch is actually pretty damn impressive when you compare it to the Steam Deck, because it's not OLED, but it's a 1080p screen, 7.9 inches, a little bit bigger than the Steam Deck, which I prefer. It also has VRR, variable refresh rate, which I believe this one does not have. I believe it doesn't have variable refresh rate, and it could play games up to 120 hertz, which is really damn impressive to actually say that you're going to be able to play a game at 120 hertz or 120 frames per second on the handheld Nintendo device. That's pretty damn impressive. So when it comes to the screen, I think, you know, yeah, you can lean into the OLED because the OLED is always going to look better. But I do like the specs of the screen of the Nintendo Switch 2. We got to give the Nintendo Switch props for that because it still looks good. When it comes to power-wise, these two devices actually feel very, very comparable when it comes to the power. This has a custom NVIDIA CPU in the inside. This has a Zen 2 AMD processor, which is also a custom processor. And performance-wise, they actually feel pretty damn similar when it comes to performance. This actually has 12 gigabytes. No, the Nintendo Switch 2 actually has 12 gigabytes of RAM versus 16 gigabytes of RAM, which of course is going to be better. Some games are going to run better here, obviously, than over there. And also here, when you get the Steam Deck, you also have the option for 512 gigabytes of storage or 1 terabyte of storage. Now, keep in mind that that's for the OLED version. You can actually get this with the LCD screen. I think they still sell it with the LCD screen. And I think it is actually 256 just like that, right? I think so. But it's also cheaper too. It's actually $399. This right here, the one that I have here, is actually $549. And the Switch 2 is actually $449. So it's $100 more expensive than the Nintendo Switch 2, and I think that's pretty good. You know, I think that makes the Nintendo Switch 2 look pretty damn good, because of course the great thing about the Nintendo Switch 2 is that now you're gonna get a lot of third-party games coming to the Nintendo Switch 2. Right now, everything is still not guaranteed yet that we're gonna get day-on-day releases on both devices. But the great thing about the Nintendo Switch is that thanks to the power and thanks to the performance and the inside, the games, we're going to get a lot more AAA games on the Nintendo Switch 2. The awesome advantage of the Steam Deck is that it's basically open. You know, every game that comes to PC, you will be able to play here, whether it's verified or not verified. You're going to be able to play here. Some games are going to be performing better than others. But, you know, that's the great thing about PC gaming, that you have the flexibility to adjust the games to the screen and to the power that you have in your hands. Now, when it comes to ergonomically, this beats the hell out of the Nintendo Switch, because the Nintendo Switch is just super, super flat. It is just super flat. One of my complaints of the Nintendo Switch 1, you know, carries over to the Nintendo Switch 2. It's just too flat. And if it wasn't for third-party companies making, you know, comfortable Joy-Cons for the device, the Nintendo Switch would be very painful to play for a long period of time. So that's the negative thing about that. The Nintendo Switch 2, of course, here you're always going to have a very good ergonomic. It still has the buttons on the back. Feels really, really comfortable. Weight-wise, they're pretty much almost the same. Of course, battery life, when it comes to the battery, I'm getting pretty much the same battery life on these two devices. I'm getting around 3 hours to around 6 hours on this device, depending what games I'm playing. Same thing over here. I'm getting around 2.5 hours or 3 hours to 5 or 6 hours, depending what games I'm playing. So yeah, that's one thing that battery wise, I can't actually say that the Nintendo Switch is better than the Steam Deck. I can't say that. If you ask me which of these two devices I would prefer, if I would have to only get one, if I only have to get one, I have to choose a Steam Deck, because the Steam Deck is more open. I can play almost every single PC game that comes here. And not only that, I can actually play Xbox games via cloud streaming. I could play PlayStation games via cloud streaming. I can also put emulation here, and I can actually play Nintendo Switch games here if I wanted, but I don't want to do that. But, you know, it has a lot more flexibility. The other advantage here that for me is an advantage, I don't know, you can actually use any micro SD card to play games from the card. And the cool thing is that they're pretty cheap now. They're very cheap. And believe me, I've played AAA games from those cards installed here on the card. The Nintendo Switch 2 now requires micro SD express cards, which goes right there. Express cards. And they are very, very, very expensive right now. A little bit hard to find right now, but they're very expensive. I don't know why Nintendo had to go to express when you can clearly play AAA games from the normal micro SD cards. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And of course, like I said, since this is, I could go ahead and switch to desktop mode. Since this is not locked to SteamOS, because of course this uses SteamOS, but it's Linux in the background. So it's basically a PC. So You technically can do your homework here as well, so you can have your media applications here, Hulu and all that. Today, till this day, the Nintendo Switch still has no YouTube application, doesn't work, or media application doesn't work. But here, you know, you have a browser and all that. So this is basically a PC, and it's only $100 more expensive than the Nintendo Switch 2. So here, finally, we have the Legion Go versus the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, this right here is a very good comparison because they're kind of similar. They're kind of similar, even though in the inside they're very, very different. The screen here is actually 8.8 inches LCD, 2560 by 1600p, okay, up to 144 hertz. The Nintendo Switch is a 7.9 inches, 1080p, VRR, up to 120 hertz, which is still good. Honestly, even though, yes, this is a bigger resolution, I still prefer the 1080p because, let's be real, I've been playing AAA games here for a long time, and I do not play the games at 1600p or 2K or 4K. That's impossible unless you want a device, a gameplay experience, which is horrible, and you want to get like 20 minutes of battery life. That's not happening. So honestly, the fact that this is a steady 1080p, 120 hertz, I still prefer that screen over this one. Yes, I do like the size, but the Nintendo Switch for me at running at steady 1080p, 120 hertz or 720p, 120 hertz, I do prefer that because let's be real, I've been playing games here mostly in either 800p or 1000p. I don't go from there because if I go over that, I'm going to have a very bad experience. Of course, unless I'm playing like a very simple indie game, yes, I could go crank it up all the way to the top. But if I'm playing a AAA game, I have to stick to 800 or 1000p. Power-wise, when it comes to these two devices, power-wise, this over here has more power, of course, because this has the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor with RDNA graphics. Of course, this has a custom processor, which is more comparable to the Steam Deck. This is actually more powerful than the Steam Deck, and it's more powerful than the Nintendo Switch as well. Also on the inside, you got 512 gigabytes of RAM or 1 terabyte. And of course, you can also, where is it? You can also put a micro SD card there as well. And you can add more storage so you can install more games. Battery wise, the Nintendo Switch 2 is better. Of course, the Nintendo Switch 2, you're going to get easily 3 hours, 2 hours and a half to 6 hours of battery life. Here, you're basically going to get 2 hours to 4 hours of battery life. That's what I've been squeezing out of this. And sometimes you might get even less than 2 hours of battery life if you're cranking up the settings. That way you get the best performance. But that's what I like about this device, that you can play games, AAA games here. You could crank it up so it can look incredible. You could control the TDP. You could go all the way up to 30 TDP wattage. And you can make the games look here freaking incredible. But of course, you're going to sacrifice battery for quality. But if you want performance, you have to lower it down. But that's what I like about the Legion Go. Of course, like I said, this is Windows 11. It has this right here that is basically like a launcher, right? This is basically the launcher for the Nintendo, for this Legion Go, which lets you control the device. But normally I stick to here, and the number one reason that I think this is the best, you know, not necessarily because it's the Legion Go, it's because it's Windows 11 and it's the Xbox Game Pass for PC. The Nintendo games are getting expensive. We know a lot of people, we've been complaining of Mario Kart World costing $80. A lot of games are costing $80 now, and same thing goes with the Steam Deck. PC games are getting expensive too. But the beauty of this, the reason that I've been playing more on my Legion Go than on my Steam Deck and then on my Nintendo, is because of Xbox Game Pass. Right now, I just pay like around $14 a month. And on day one, I could go ahead and play all the games that Xbox has for PC and for Xbox exclusive games day one on this device, and that's it. Nothing extra. How can I complain against that? how can I actually complain on that? I can't complain about that. That is something that I have to mention here, because that's the advantage that a Windows handheld device has over the Steam Deck, has over the Nintendo Switch, and it will have over whatever PlayStation comes out with. And that's the reason why I am super, super excited for the release of the ROG Ally Xbox X, or the ROG Xbox Ally X, which was announced very recently and is coming out later this year. And I'm definitely going to get it because, like I said, in the last couple months since the year started, I've been playing a lot more on my Legion Go than on my Steam Deck and then on any other device. It's because the openness of Windows 11 and the ability to actually install native games from Xbox Game Pass here on the device. That's why I can't wait to actually get that experience from the new ROG Xbox Ally X. Definitely gonna get it, so make sure you actually pay attention to that. The other similarities that these two devices has is the Joy-Cons, or I don't know, I forgot how Legion Go calls it, but you can go like that, right? And this right here comes with this here, and you can go ahead and put it, how is it? Let me see. Am I using the right one? Yeah. You put it like that, and you can go ahead and play games like this, right? You can play games like that. But the negative thing is, compared to the Nintendo Switch 2, is that when you unhook it, you have to use it properly as a mouse. You actually have this. You have to be carrying with this around. And you also have to turn this on, right? You have to turn this on so it can get into mouse mode. And once you turn that on, see how, oh my God, seriously? See what I mean? See how uncomfortable this thing is? You have to walk around with this thing and turn it on and make it work. And like you see there, you can actually make it work. That's very cool. And of course, you use the buttons that you have here. And it's so cool. That's something very cool that this thing has. But Nintendo Switch 2 does it better. So when you go to the Nintendo Switch 2, let's go put that to the side. All you got to do is unplug it, and right away, it starts working as a mouse. That's something you cannot beat. And same thing goes with the left one. If you take the left one, you can actually use the left one as a mouse as well. So you're not locked to the right one. You can also use the left one. And over here, I believe you're only locked to the right one, because the right one is the only one that has the sensor for the mouse. So that's that's something super cool. And that's why I say these two devices are the most comparable ones, because they actually have the mouse features with the detachable controllers, and that is so damn cool. You know, over here you put it like that, back again, it just snaps in. You have to carry this around. Make sure you turn this off, because sometimes I forgot to turn that off, the mouse feature. Then when I start playing, I'm like, what the hell's going on here? The controls are not working. And that's it. Look at that. That's freaking awesome. So yeah, if you ask me which one I prefer, device-wise, I prefer the Switch. Device-wise. You know, physically wise, I prefer the Switch, even though, yeah, this is still comfortable, but it's heavier and it's very squarish. The Nintendo Switch is thinner. It doesn't have ergonomic whatsoever, but, you know, ergonomic wise, it's very thin. It's very thin. One next to each other. Then the Switch is very, very thin, but this has a very better ergonomic than the Switch 2. Software wise, you know, I would definitely prefer a Windows handheld device over a Nintendo Switch. And I'm not just talking about the Legion Go. I would definitely prefer a ROG Ally X or any other Windows device over the Nintendo Switch 2, because, like I said, Nintendo Switch 2 is locked to Nintendo Switch games, and games are getting more expensive. Here, with Windows, you have the flexibility of Xbox Game Pass, Ubisoft Connect. You have Ubisoft Connect, which is also a service that you pay like $20, and you play every single first release Ubisoft game. And that's the reason why I've been playing mostly this year. This year, the Legion Go has been dominating my handheld gaming playtime because of that, because of the flexibility of Xbox Game Pass and Ubisoft Plus or Ubisoft Connect. So yeah, other than that, guys, this is what I want to share with you, my opinions about the handheld devices that I own and which one I prefer over the other. But let me know in the comments, which device do you prefer in your life? A Nintendo Switch device, a Windows handheld device, or a Steam Deck device, or an actual PlayStation Portal device? Let me know in the comments, which one do you actually prefer. Like I said, I would prefer a Windows standalone handheld device over a locked device. Thanks for watching this video. Till next time. Bye-bye.